Because beauty is tied to what we can't know.
So I'm open to the idea that I'm going to experience something wonderful.
It's what we're looking for, not just what we're looking at.
It belongs to everybody. Everyone is welcome.
Like, I love a vacant lot filled with weeds and rubble.
And everyone's equal in sharing in these beautiful things.
And I can just stand there and look at that. I feel magic.
I'm Carmel Michael, and this is Hyacinth Podcast, where along with guest scholars, writers, and artists, I ponder beauty, anger, love, loss, fear, glory, and the unbreakable heart of human living. In this episode, I zero in on beauty. What is it? And where can we find it? In this crazy, crazy world that is burning up, quite literally, and seems to be falling apart, why does beauty even matter? I've contended with beauty as an aesthetic my whole life. You know that Bob Dylan lyric, "Beauty walks a razor's edge, someday I'll make it mine"? As a teenage girl, I'd listen to that song. It's called Shelter from the Storm. I'd listen to it on repeat, like a mantra. I thought, someday. But years later, I've come to understand beauty in an entirely new and life-altering way, as detached from appearance and physical things, and layered with something much deeper and timeless. I encountered the work of Elaine Scarry, her seminal book on beauty and being just, and one of my now favorite writers, Marilynne Robinson, whose essays and novels treat beauty as imperative to society. More recently, I've read Saidiya Hartman's incredible new book, Wayward Lives, Beautiful Experiments. This book is amazing, by the way. I can't recommend it enough. Hartman defines beauty as, quote, a way of creating possibility in the space of enclosure, a transfiguration of the given. This is beauty not only as an aesthetic, but as a way of living, a way of knowing and seeing, a way of creating our world. The professor who first introduced me to these new concepts of beauty.
So my name's Alice Brittan, and I teach contemporary global fiction at Dalhousie University.
I'm so excited for you to hear from Dr. Brittan, because the ways that I now approach my research and writing, and even the foundational ideas behind this podcast, I attribute to what I learned from her while I was a student at Dalhousie University. Alice is an award-winning and widely published literary scholar with an MA from the University of Toronto and a PhD from the University of Pennsylvania. Also a guest on this episode.
My name is Dhiru Thadani, and I'm an architect and planner, originally from Bombay, India, now living in Washington, D.C. And over the years, I have gone from architecture to town planning and authored a few books and taught at a few universities.
I first met Dhiru Thadani in Seaside, Florida, where we were both on a month-long artist residency called Escape to Create. I was there writing. Dhiru was there working on a series of drawings and a book. We shared a love of good songwriting, and over the years we've stayed in touch. When I was touring as a musician in the eastern U.S. several years back, Dhiru even hosted a concert for me in D.C. He is a renowned architect and urbanist. He has worked alongside the likes of Robert Davis, Leon Creer, won awards including a Lifetime Achievement Award from the International Society of City and Regional Planners. Dhiru has seen a lot of the world and knows how to tell a good story about the places he's been.
You know, I have been very lucky to travel and experience all these great things and great moments.
He starts every day by creating a drawing.
It's also, I think, I dream a lot. So I wake up and I'm like, I just go to my desk and I start drawing. I mean, there's no downtime, there's no coffee. It's like, okay, here's the idea for the drawing.
I think of Dhiru as a person who is constantly looking at our world, someone with very open eyes. And so, with Dhiru's understanding of the material and aesthetic traditions of beauty in our built environments, and Dr. Brittan's study of beauty as a way of being, we're in for some pretty important insights about what beauty really is. I've put their separate interviews into a kind of conversation here because I was surprised both by the parallels and the paradoxes that emerged in their responses. I started simply by asking, what is beauty?
I think of beauty as a way of being. I think of it as a state of mind, although I always prefer the word being to mind because being is the larger word. I think it's an orientation to other people and to the world.
Beauty is a value. It's as important as truth and goodness. And it provides meaning to life, because beauty is what takes your breath away and it uplifts the human spirit.
And that's why, for me, beauty, the kind of beauty that I'm interested in, is always tied with gift thinking and with ideas about grace, which are also millennia old, because beauty is tied to what we can't know and what we can't bring under control.
And there was a time when artists, all kinds of artists, writers, poets, singers, they worked to embody beauty. That was the goal, to have something beautiful in their work that moved the human spirit. And somehow in the last 50 years, we have lost that. It's gone to originality and abstraction and concepts.
It evicts us from our own authority. Beauty is something that sends us out of our minds. It sends us out of our comfortable forms of power. And that sense of powerlessness, of awe, of astonishment, even of terror at the most extreme ends of the spectrum, these ideas have always been associated with beauty, and they've also always been associated with the sacred. And for so many people, the idea of the sacred, the holy, is untenable. We have broken, many of us, including myself, with traditional forms of worship, traditional points of access to life outside of life, life outside of visible life. And so we have to find new ways of satisfying that hunger.
I grew up in Bombay, and from the age of 5 to 15, I lived in an apartment across from Bombay University. And looking out my window, so Bombay University was a sort of Gothic stone building built by the British in India, and there was a pediment entry. It was kind of a classical pediment, columns, and on top said the word science. So that's what my bedroom faced, and I could see that when I was laying in bed. As a young child, it made an impression on me that this is an important building. And then the word science was there, emblazed in the pediment. I think there was no doubt in my mind after that experience that I would go to college and study science. So I think there was a very strong influence by seeing this very strong civic building every day, for 10 years. That motivated at least my first career path.
I grew up in a family that was obsessed with beauty. My grandmother was in what she always called the beauty business. She was a hairdresser, and for more than 50 years, she owned and ran 5 hair salons. But she didn't call them hair salons because no one in those days did. She called them, the older term, beauty parlors. My grandfather was a steel worker for 45 years, but he also was an amateur clothing designer. He had a dress shop in one of the buildings that my grandmother owned, and he sold women's clothes, and he designed some of those clothes himself. And my parents are both painters. So the family business was the beauty business. We lived with my grandparents, so this was very close to my daily life. I would say for 3 generations, we are a family that's obsessed with aesthetics. like my grandfather, I believe in the magic of a beautiful dress.
In that same apartment building, there was the front of house, which was the apartments, and then there was the back of house, which was the domestic help lived. So we all lived in the same building. And from my apartment, I could look down and see the compound, and I saw a teenager. And he was drawing, and he turned out to be the son of one of the domestic help. Anyway, I went down, engaged with him, and looked at his drawing, was impressed, and he gave me my first piece of paper and pencil in the sense that and said, "Hey, you can do this too." And there was something in that drawing that spoke to me and said, "Well, you're capturing the essence of this place, and I want to be able to do that." So drawing was always, part of my life from a very early age, and I realized that architecture was a really good combination of science and art. So that's how I landed up studying architecture.
I grew up in a really poor neighborhood in Hamilton. It was also very disreputable. It was home to a notorious motorcycle gang. And the city decided that the best way to deal with this blight and the people who lived there was to gradually shut the whole neighborhood down by expropriating everyone's homes and bulldozing them, turning the whole neighborhood into a park. It wasn't legal to buy or sell property other than to the city. It wasn't legal to renovate your home because the city wanted your house to fall down. So it was a place that was in collapse, and it was filled with broken and abandoned things, abandoned railway tracks, halfway houses. It was sort of where the city put all the people it didn't want to deal with and hoped that everything would just eventually fall apart.
Architecture and planning is the recreation of positive experiences. So all the positive experiences that you've had in your life is sort of the catalog. And it's also one of the reasons why I make so many drawings. It's because I'm always building this catalog of places that I've visited. I want to remember them, and I want to remember the qualities, what I liked about them. You walk into a place like Piazza Navona in Rome, and it's this great oval room, and you feel like, okay, I'm part of this community, and there's, churches, houses, schools, all those things facing into that space. And as a visitor, you immediately become part of it, kind of get sucked into the city, and you say, I'm one of these people. So by studying what has worked, you study the order, the proportion, what gives you enclosure, what makes the space, so that when you actually do work, it becomes second nature in your work to instill these ideas in there. And I think that's the power that good design can have. I mean, it's hard to pinpoint this, but it really is about being moved, somehow being moved spiritually or, in some way. When you see it, it happens. And I'm not always sure, how that happens, but I'm always looking for when it, I'm sort of aware that this can happen. So I'm open to the idea that I'm going to experience something wonderful.
There are two lines from maybe my favorite poem by Robert Frost. It's called Unharvested, that circle around in my mind almost every day. And for me, they're helpful in thinking about how beauty acts on us and what it is. And the lines go like this: may something go always unharvested. May much stay out of our stated plan. When I think about right now where I feel beauty, it's in some very unexpected places, and it really is in what Robert Frost called the unharvested. It's what we don't yet have a use for, what we don't quite know what to do with. I saw magic in these boarded up houses and these vacant lots and the weeds and everything falling down in the way that I think children do. For me, this place was like the person who is wearing rags in a fairy tale, who will always turn out to be the bearer of gifts, who will always turn out to be the most powerful, majestic person in the story. For me, that was how our neighborhood was.
I have been very lucky to travel. But what we have to remember is that in every city, in every place, there are many people who don't have the opportunity to travel and see, sunset in Santorini, or, where the building's starting to light up at sunset, these kind of magical moments that happen. So it's incumbent upon us to make beautiful places in the city for people who are less fortunate and cannot afford to travel and experience these great moments. Even a simple, beautifully designed fountain in a park, that could be the moment for somebody less fortunate. He or she could go to that park and say, yeah, this is really great. I love sitting here, in the middle of the day. And that's the obligation that we have to everybody. That's what it is about the civic realm, what we call the civic realm. It belongs to everybody. Everyone is welcome, and everyone's equal in sharing in these beautiful things. We shouldn't privatize beauty or beautiful objects. It should be out there. I mean, that could make your day, just being inspired. And I think we need to embed that in cities and places everywhere.
And so at this point in my life, I find that I am so drawn to broken, abandoned, and disused things. Like, I love a vacant lot filled with weeds and rubble. And I can just stand there and look at that fenced off disaster zone. And I feel it fully in my body, in my mind. I feel magic. I feel the life outside of life, because it's a place that's unharvested. It's not part of the stated plan yet. Maybe it's in development. Maybe in, 4 months from now, a developer will break ground and build a condominium. But right now, this is a place that's not on the blueprint. It's potential. It's where no one can see the power yet.
The unknown and the meticulously designed, the wondrous and the mathematical, the built and the vacant. Somehow, beauty resides in all these places. Elaine Scarry writes that beauty repeatedly brings us face to face with our own powers to create. This is how she connects beauty to justice. So just as we feel impelled to create beauty, Scarry writes that we have a duty to, quote, support just arrangements where they already exist and to help bring them into being where they are not yet established. Beauty enables us to imagine what we need to create, the potential of what isn't there yet, from the vacant lot to the Piazza Navona. Still, I often worry that my desire to simply create something beautiful, which is really my whole mission for this podcast, I worry that it's, the most privileged and pointless thing ever. Pointless to put my energy into when there are so many concrete problems in the world that need work. But I have to go back to Saidiya Hartman. She quotes partially from Elaine Scarry here, but I think she captures the purpose and power of beauty in some more immediate way. She writes, "What is beauty, if not the intense sensation of being pulled toward the animating force of life, or the yearning to bring things into relation with a kind of urgency, as though one's life depended on it?" So, yeah, we still need to think and build things, to fight and march in the streets to make our world better, but maybe looking for beauty, valuing it more, understanding its power. Maybe that's what motivates us to do all these other things. I hope so. This has been Hyacinth Podcast, Looking for Beauty. Thank you to my guests, Alice Brittan and Dhiru Thadani. As always, you can find links to all the works discussed in this episode at hyacinthpodcast.com, where you can also find info on Dhiru Thadani's books. And follow Hyacinth Podcast on social media where, for this episode especially, I'll be posting lots of extra material, including some of Dhiru's amazing drawings and tidbits from some of the books I mentioned in the episode. A special thank you also to my friend and guitarist Nick McLean, whose playing you heard here. I made the score for this episode from pieces of a song I released as a single last year called When It's Time to Go. If you want to hear that song, just search Carmel Michael on Spotify or wherever you get your music. I took the guitar parts from that song and rewrote a whole bunch of other stuff over it, but thanks to Nick for his gorgeous guitar playing in the original track. Subscribe to Hyacinth Podcast on your favorite app and never miss an episode. I'm Carmel Michael. Thank you for listening, and talk real soon.